Hello and welcome to this Wednesday live stream that will hopefully improve your English. That's why we're here. And if this is your first time watching, my name's Craig. I write material for mansioningles.com and you can study English there for free. We have lots of courses and material that you can access, and we also have a podcast over at inglespodcast.com. And that's also a free resource that is published every Sunday on the website inglespodcast.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're not listening to podcasts to improve your English, you should be. And joining me, it's free. Why not? And
It's
joining
free.
me there
That's
on
good.
my right is my good friend Lynne. Hello, Lynne.
Hello, Craig. How? Well, I know how you are because I
You
spoke to
asked
you
me before
earlier.
we
I
recorded,
asked you
yeah?
before, but you're well, aren't you? Yeah. Um, yeah. So if you don't want to listen to podcasts and you want to have an English teacher, then you can come to me at putitlikethis.com. Although I often use podcasts as well as material to start conversations with too. So if you haven't joined us before, then I'll just tell you a little bit. My website is putitlikethis.com. I'm an online English teacher, and I really make tailor-made courses to try to help you find your own voice in English. So depending on what you need your English for, then I design different types of courses to try to help you be able to get to your objectives as quickly as possible. It can be exam-based courses, or it could be maybe you're a teacher of English and you want to improve your pronunciation, or maybe you want to improve your skills teaching in CLIL classrooms. Or maybe you like English just for general purposes, of course, business English as well. If you go to my website, you can find out more details about the different types of English that I do work in. And then contact me if you want classes.
Yeah, for sure. And we are broadcasting this live stream a little bit earlier this Wednesday. So if you didn't notice that, you're probably watching the replay. It's
Oh,
just today. So we'll be
yeah.
back on the 19th of April at the usual time of 8 o'clock, 8 p.m.
Mhm,
European time. It's just today we're recording a little bit earlier. And
mhm.
if you are watching the replay, thanks for spending time with us. And remember to comment, because we do go in and look at the comments that you write in the
Mhm.
chat after this goes out live. Lynne,
Yes.
what's the topic
Uh-huh.
today?
Well, the topic today is manners. And I can see, to start with, that we have already people who have very good manners when it comes to punctuality, because there we've got already in the chat Caroline. Hello, Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Hema. Hi, Hema. And Santiago from Argentina, which is great. Thank you for joining us. And also for being so punctual, because we have changed the time of the class, as Craig said
Yeah,
today. So we're going to talk
great to
about
see you here.
manners today. And do you think it's important to have good manners? Do you have good manners? Is it important nowadays?
Of course I do.
So
I'm English.
yeah, you're English, so you do. Manners are important to you, are they, Craig?
They are. Yeah, I think that's got more to do with my age, perhaps, than my
Mhm,
nationality. I think things have changed over the years, and we'll talk about that later. But
mhm,
my parents told me it was really important to have good manners and be respectful. So I
mhm,
think it is important. And I think there is a strong connection with language learning and manners, because maybe when you are speaking English, if English is not your first language, then maybe the way you come across,
mhm,
and that phrase verb to come across, which it means the way people perceive you, their
mhm,
perception of you as a non-native English speaker
mhm.
might not be someone of good manners. So we think it's really
Uh-huh.
important to speak about this topic today of manners.
Yeah. But I also think, Craig, you said, oh, yes, I think manners are important because I'm English. But I think manners exist in all cultures. It's just that they're different.
True.
And I think one of the big problems with not just language learning, but language learning because you're relating to other cultures. And one of the big problems about manners is that from culture to culture, there are different norms, yeah, about manners. And so it is true, as you said before, that when you learn, if you're learning a language, you also have to learn a little bit of the culture where that language is spoken and adapt accordingly. Now, both you and I are, of course, British, so we'll be talking today very clearly about British manners. But, you know, manners in America are slightly different too. And manners in New Zealand or in other countries where English is spoken as a native tongue, India, for example, parts of Africa where English is the main language, the cultures can be completely different.
That's true. And Gemma says that she's Spanish and manners are also important. Of course, in Spanish, in the language, you have a different word if you want to be more polite for the second person. You have usted. You
Yeah.
have tú if you're being informal, and usted if you're being more more respectful. And we don't
Exactly.
have that in English. You is
No.
you. We don't have that. So we use other words.
We use other words to say it. And that linguistic thing is ingrained in other languages too, like in German and in French it exists. I believe in Italian too, I believe, yeah. So other languages sometimes have different grammatical structures, which where their manners are reflected in it. So it is very closely linked with language learning, isn't it?
Vicente's also in Spain, and he says that
Uh-huh.
he wouldn't like to be bad-mannered and forget to say hello to anyone on the internet. Hello, Vicente. Thank you for
Thank you,
the lovely
Vicente, for that
introduction.
lovely introduction. Yes, and Graciela is with us too from Argentina. So maybe that's the first manners, isn't it? We can talk about that one straight away. Is that one of the things in English which is important? I think is to introduce yourself. Don't you
Yes,
think that in a
absolutely.
crowd to
And many
say who
people
you are?
don't because of shyness. People are shy.
Mm-hmm.
They think, oh, maybe I shouldn't put the
Mm-hmm.
attention on me. But I do make a point of introducing myself to anybody new or anyone
Mm-hmm.
new who comes into a group. I say, hi, I'm Craig. What's
Mm-hmm.
your name? Nice to meet you. Immediately, I make sure that
Mm-hmm.
people are welcome.
Mm-hmm. And you can use phrases like, hi, I often say, hi, I'm Lynn. I don't think I've met you before.
Yeah.
And that sort of expression, I don't think we've met, or I don't think I've met you before. It kind of softens it, doesn't it? Because if you just say, hi, I'm Lynn, it maybe makes you sound that you're very important and that people that I want
Right.
people
I'm
to know
Lynn.
who I am because I'm Lynn. Didn't you know?
Don't you know who I am?
Exactly. So we kind of soften it with that phrase, hi, I'm Lynn. I don't think I've met you before. And
Yeah.
that is sort of a little bit, some of, I think the manners in language in English can be something, we use the word self-effacing. I don't know, can we put that in the chat? Craig, can you
Yes.
write self-effacing in the chat? And it kind of means that you try to take away the importance of you personally. You try to show humility a little bit when you're trying to interact with other people. And a lot of the English language is like that, isn't it? Self-effacing. So you say, I don't think we've met. You try to take away, you don't want to attribute too much importance to yourself.
Hmm.
And you want to give protagonism to the other people. I think.
Exactly. Hi, Natalia. Natalia's watching live from the Ukraine, and Santiago, we said hello to before, and
Hmm.
Graciela, I think, as well. So lovely to see so many of you
Yeah.
notice the different time. Let's look at some vocabulary that connects to manners. We've got obviously good manners and bad manners, and you can turn that into a compound adjective by saying good mannered, a good mannered
Hmm.
person, or a good mannered man,
Hmm.
or good mannered lady, etc., or well mannered,
Hmm.
well behaved. Be
Hmm.
careful of the opposite of polite. Many people forget that prefix. It's impolite. That's the
Hmm.
opposite of polite,
Hmm.
impolite,
Hmm.
which is very similar to rude. Don't be so rude.
I think we tend to use rude more commonly in spoken English, don't we? Impolite exists, but we usually say, oh, they were rude, or that's rude, when we're complaining about people who don't show good manners. And I think we have to, because we've got a lot of Spanish speakers in the live stream now and watching maybe the replay, it's important, I think, to mention sometimes there's a bit of a false friend between Spanish and English. Sometimes Spanish people say it's important, education is important. And they really are meaning manners are important. For us in England, in English, education is to do with academic education. So it's whether you've learned maths and science and biology and all the subjects. That's education. And in Spanish, I think the word educación is something like when you say they haven't got any educación, it means
Manners.
you mean that they are bad mannered, or they are being rude, or they do not have good manners.
Yeah.
So be very careful with that false friend with education and manners. Okay, education for us is purely academic. It's got nothing to do with this, what we're talking about today.
That's a good point. Natalia says that she asks, is it considered good manners to apologize frequently with or without reasons? In English, yes, it's really funny actually, Natalia. If you're walking along the street in the UK and you bump into somebody by accident, to bump into means you're not looking where you're going, you're walking along the street and you hit somebody with your arm. The person who gets hit usually apologizes. Oh, sorry. Even though they didn't actually do anything.
Do anything.
They are the victim and they feel they need to apologize because that's good manners. So yeah, British people do apologize, especially they like using phrases like I'm afraid or I'm sorry if they want to disagree or they want to ask for something, or if something might inconvenience another person. I'm afraid I don't quite agree with you. I'm sorry, I don't see it that way. So there's a lot of apologizing in English to be polite. Yes.
But it isn't really apologizing. That's what it is. I at the end of this podcast, at the end of this live stream, I will give a recommendation for a podcast, because I've listened to a very good series of podcasts about manners, and the person on this podcast explained it very nicely, I thought, about why English people say sorry even when they haven't done anything. And what he said, and I think it's true, is when they say sorry, what they're trying to do is to mitigate the damage that has been done. So they're trying to lessen the damage. So, and they're trying to offer, there is this phrase in English, to offer an olive branch. They're trying to offer the other person an opportunity to make things right. Okay, so that the other person has wronged you. They've stepped on your foot, or they've taken the place in the queue in front of you without realizing. And when you say, sorry, but I think it's my turn, you offer, it's a conciliatory tone. So you are trying to diffuse the situation. To diffuse the situation is to take out the violence or the aggression in the situation. And you're offering an opportunity to make the situation good again. When you say, I'm sorry, but, or I'm afraid, but. Of course, it does not mean that you're apologizing. It doesn't mean for 1 minute that you are sorry for anything. And nobody believes that you're sorry for it if you haven't done anything, right? But that is, if you like, when somebody says to you, sorry, when they bump into you, they are giving you a cue. A cue is what actors give. I'm getting a bit lost now, aren't I? But on this stage, in when actors are saying the play, they're reciting the play, they remember the beginnings of lines, and that's what helps them to prompt to remember what to say. So when somebody says, I'm sorry, they're giving you a cue to apologize. That's your tip. Now you're on stage. Now you apologize to me because you stepped on my foot. If you don't do that, then you're in trouble. Then you have broken the rules of the manners, haven't you? Yeah.
And just to clarify, that's CUE, to give
Mm-hmm.
someone a cue like an actor on a stage, and not to stand in a queue, which is QUEUE. So the same pronunciation, different word.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I think I've just confused everybody by my intervention there. I'm
But
sorry.
but I've been writing the vocabulary, which I think is
Uh-huh.
very useful, to bump into, to give someone a cue, to mitigate the situation, to
Uh-huh.
diffuse
The
like a bomb. You
situation. Yeah.
diffuse a bomb situation. So it's all very good
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary. Um, Graciella's talking about education at school, manners at home, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. We're going to look at different areas and give our opinion on manners from a British perspective. But of course, we want to hear from you what it's like in Germany, Caroline, what it's like in Argentina,
Mm-hmm.
in Spain, in other parts of the world, just to get some different opinions on this. But I think it's useful to look first at some expressions you can use when you speak about manners. And here are some
Mm-hmm.
examples that Lynne sent me earlier. I can't stand it, which is similar to I really dislike it. I can't stand it when blah, blah, blah. Or I hate it when people do this, for example.
I hate it when people bump into me and do not say sorry. Mhm.
I hate it when people don't hold the door open and it smacks in my
In your
face.
face. Uh-huh.
And yeah, and they don't look behind them. They probably hear there's someone
Mm-hmm.
behind them, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't. They're in too much of a hurry, too much of a rush, and they just go through the door and smack.
Mm-hmm.
The door hits me in the face. I
Mm-hmm.
can't stand it when that happens.
Mm-hmm. And then you can also say it really gets on my nerves when. Uh-huh. Um, and you can say, then of course there are many modal verbs. When when you think you know the way people should behave, you can say you should do this, you ought to do this, or you're supposed to do this, or you must do this. Mm-hmm. Now, I have to say as well, I just before we go into the situations, I don't know if the listeners, if you find the same thing because you're learning English. But I've lived in Spain for a long time, 23 years. And before that, I lived for 13 years in Germany. So I've had experience of different manners. But I still, even though I've got quite a lot of cultural awareness, I find that my physical reaction is the same with manners. So, for example, I can't stand it when somebody bumps into me in the street and I say automatically, in English, I would say, I'm sorry. And of course, foolishly, I translate that into Spanish. So I say, lo siento, or I say in German, entschuldige mich, right? And in those cultures, for example, apologizing when you haven't done something is not normal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And so the people that I do that to, who are Spanish or German, of course, usually some of them don't say anything back
right.
to me. And then that really makes me angry and I can't stand it, even though I know that it's a different etiquette.
Yeah, it's so
Does that happen to you?
ingrained
It's
in
so
your
ingrained
education.
into you,
It's
that
ingrained.
I can feel the blood boiling in me, even though, and that happens a lot with manners. Do you find that too, Craig? That even though you've lived in another country for so long, there are certain things that still
Yes, and we're going
bother
to
you,
talk.
even though they shouldn't. Uh-huh.
Yes, and we're going to talk about manners on the road when you're driving. And one thing in a similar way to that really bothers me here is when I stop for somebody to cross the road, for example, or if I stop for another car so that they can come out and they don't acknowledge and lift their
Uh-huh.
hand or just say you know. And in England, that's very common.
It's
People
very common, isn't it?
acknowledge that you
Uh-huh.
do something out of manners, out of courtesy. And
Uh-huh.
here in Spain, they just completely ignore it.
Mhm.
And I think, oh, well, yeah,
Mhm.
okay. And it's weird because there's no reason why they should.
Uh-huh.
There's no reason why they should acknowledge or wave or say thank you,
As it
because
was
if I
your
want to stop,
decision to do
it's
it.
my decision to
Yeah.
do
Uh-huh.
it, and that's what I want to do to
Mhm.
feel good about myself. But
Mhm.
in a similar way to your sorry, it's so much in my upbringing, my culture, my
Uh-huh.
education that it just bothers me still after 25 years of living
Yeah.
here in Spain. It's weird. It's
Mhm.
strange.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's go to the first area then, because we mentioned queuing before. Manners
Mhm.
with queuing. Now, obviously, the British are well known for their queuing. It is a national sport,
Mhm.
and queuing is something that's taught in schools. No, it's not. It's not. But
Uh-huh.
British people like to queue, and in Spain, I've noticed that some people do queue, waiting for a
Mhm.
bus, for example, and some people just don't. And nobody seems to mind. There doesn't seem to be any objection, or
Mhm.
nobody protests if somebody jumps the queue. To
Mhm.
jump the queue is to go in front of other people who have been waiting in line.
Mhm.
And in American English, it's cutting in line.
To
And in
cut
British
in
English,
line.
it's
Uh-huh.
jumping the queue.
Queue. Mhm. It's very interesting queuing manners because they are very different across the world. I remember when I was in France, I don't know if we've got any French listeners today, but I seem to remember in France that it was just a push. When you went to get onto the bus, nobody queued and everybody just pushed. So
Yeah.
you had to really get in there. If you stayed back to be polite, you could not get into the bus. But in Spain, it's not quite like that because I found, Craig, in Valencia, that when you go to a place, there is no physical queue. So you don't see a line of people.
But you
But
ask, you
there is a
communicate.
queue because the people ask, ¿Quién es la
Yeah.
última?
Who
Uh-huh.
is the last
Who is the
person?
last one? And people then acknowledge yo, and then you go, okay, I'm after you. And
Which
then
is
you
nice
wait.
because there's communication.
Oh,
There's people
absolutely.
speaking
And
to
that
each
is,
other.
I think that is the manners in Spain. And when people have jumped queues, I have noticed in Valencia that people do complain. They say, excuse me, no, 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 I was before you. They say that. I don't dare because my Spanish isn't good enough. And I'm scared of getting into a fight. So I just let
Natal-
them go.
Natalia's from Ukraine, and she
Mhm.
says that in her country, Ukraine, people value politeness, respect for elders. That's a nice expression.
Mhm. Very
Elders
good.
is nicer. Is a nicer expression than old people.
Wow.
Elders, and hospitality. It's common to greet people with a handshake
Hmm.
or a kiss on the cheek. That kiss on the cheek is also something that I was very pleased that it kind of disappeared in during COVID, during the pandemic, because I've never felt 100% comfortable kissing people who I don't know, who I've
On
never
the cheek.
met, as a greeting for the first time. I'm
Mhm.
fine if I see you, Lynn, and we might kiss on the cheek
Mhm.
because we know each other and we're good
Uh-huh.
friends. But when you're introduced for the first time, why would you get so close and invade their body space to kiss them on the cheek?
I'm so
It's
glad.
against. I don't like it. I'm sorry. I don't like
I'm
it.
so glad that you've modified that because I was feeling terrified. I was thinking, "Oh my God, every time I see you, I always kiss you on the cheek."
No, that's different. If because it's look, some guys I
Uh-huh.
meet and I shake their hands because I don't
Uh-huh.
have a very close relationship with them. And some
Mhm.
guys I hug because I like to
Mhm.
hug, but only if I feel that strong connection
Mhm.
with other
Mhm.
men. And
Mhm.
men hugging is not something that's very common, but there are some very close friends that I like to
Mhm.
hug.
Mhm.
And I think it depends very much on the relationship. But the first time you meet someone
Mhm.
kissing, I'm not
Well,
very.
I think I got used. I don't mind that at all, but I think it's also a bit of a difference. Even though we're talking about British manners, I think these manners also change regionally because I'm from the north of England, you're from the south, and in the north of England, it was very familiar to kiss people once on the cheek,
Yeah,
not
but you're
necessarily
Northerners
change.
are Northerners are friendlier. Northerners are
Yeah,
much friendlier
not
than Londoners.
necessarily strangers, not the first time, but with very little, you didn't have to know people really, really well to give them a kiss on the cheek. And so when I moved to France, I remember the first place I went to in France was in Brittany, and you had to kiss people 4 times.
Well,
Yeah. And I was astonished, and I was at a
you
family party with 16 people. It took half an hour for everybody to say goodbye because it was four
as soon as
kisses
you
everywhere.
as soon as you say hello to everyone, it's time to say
It's time to
goodbye.
say goodbye, and you're just kissing all the time. But I don't know. I got very used to it, and then I lived in a different area of France, and it was 2 kisses. And so
Yeah.
when in Germany, it wasn't done at all. In Germany, it was very distant. If you go in for kisses, that's not done. So in the time when I lived in Germany, I had to keep my distance. But I don't know. That's something that I find I can adapt to quite easily. I have no problem with it.
Caroline, was it difficult to you to do the kissing thing coming from Germany
Hmm.
when you first came to Spain? I know Caroline's in Alicante. She's been in Spain for a while.
She has
Natalia,
just said something there, though, about
yeah,
bumping into people.
yeah, I just wanted
Can
to
you
make
see that?
sure we've addressed what Natalia said,
Sorry.
because she said it's considered impolite to arrive late for appointments or meetings.
Mm.
Yes, that really, I can't stand it when people constantly arrive
Come late.
late
No.
for meetings. I
Yeah.
don't like that at all. Yeah, Caroline says she hates it when somebody bumps into her, because in Germany everybody tries not to touch people. Yeah, that's social
That's
distancing,
yeah.
protecting your personal space.
Space.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's very strange. I can remember when I started teaching, just 2 months after arriving here, one of my students in my class during the break came up to me and he put his arm around me and he came up to me really close. He said, "Craig, I'm really sorry. I haven't done my homework." Now, there are two things wrong with that. First of all, there's a student-teacher relationship where in Spain it's much more informal. In the UK,
Informal.
it's not.
Yeah.
You don't put
No.
your arm around the
Around the
teacher in the
teacher, you don't
UK.
touch the teacher. No,
And
and you
because
don't. You certainly don't kiss the teacher either. I
he
had
didn't,
English friends
he
here.
didn't kiss me. He didn't kiss me.
Well, I
But
had English friends visiting here, and they saw my daughters kissing their teachers, and they said that's not allowed in England. You would be taken to the police if the teacher kisses a child.
Caroline, I don't know if that's a
What was the
problem
other thing
your
that was
end.
wrong for
One
Craig?
second,
Sorry,
because
I interrupted you. You said there were 2 things wrong with it.
yes, Caroline, if you can't hear us, I think it's your end. So can
Okay.
everybody let us know if you're hearing us? If you're hearing us okay, if the audio's okay,
Yeah,
please
can
say
you?
yes in the chat so that we're sure it's not us. But I have a feeling it's your end, it's your side, Caroline.
Uh,
Um, the second one was, yeah, the first thing was, and then the second thing was, I had just come from England, the English culture, where we do keep a space around us. We don't like people invading our
mhm,
personal space, coming too close to us. So it was something I got used to over time, and now it doesn't bother me. But
mhm,
initially,
mhm.
in the beginning, it really bothered me when people came up so close
Very,
and,
very
and
close.
touched me. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Gemma, yes. Natalia, yes. So it's you, Caroline. Try maybe going out and coming back in again, or
Mhm.
doing something. So it is your problem with the audio.
Mhm. Maybe we can come back to her comment. Oh, well, you've afterwards. Okay. All right. So queuing manners. So what about in Argentina? Nobody's told us in Argentina. What is the protocol for the for queuing in Argentina or in Ukraine? Because, for example, I mean, we've mentioned the Spanish one. I think that there is
Hmm.
there is a kind of order in disorder. So my impression of Spain is that you often don't see physically the queue, but the queue really does exist, and people are aware of the queue.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I know. I mean, I've been in Argentina for a couple of weeks, and I noticed that they are very polite. They use usted a lot more than
Hmm.
they do here in my area of Spain. And I remember lots of queuing. Yeah. in Argentina. I think they do queue quite a bit, but please let me know if I'm wrong.
Mhm. Mhm.
I like queuing. I think queuing is
Mhm.
good.
Mhm. I like practical queuing, you know, and I remember once in Spain having to queue for a long time for theatre tickets. And these theatre tickets, they were only sold one day, and it was very traditional in the area where I'm from that people would go on that day and they bought tickets for the whole year. And a neighbour said to me, "Oh, but the ticket office opens at 4 o'clock, but you have to be there at 9 in the morning." And I said, 9 in the morning until 4 o'clock. And they said, no, that's no problem. You get into a group. And so there was like a group of like 12 people that you knew beforehand. You go
Mm.
at 9 o'clock, you find your place in the queue. You tell the people in front of you and behind you that you are a person of 12. And then the 12 neighbors used to have like, I'll be 9 till 10, you'll be 10 till 11, you'll be 11 till 12. And so the 12 people took turns to stand in the queue. It
Makes
was really
sense.
quite
Yeah.
fascinating. I found that quite elaborate.
Makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Graciela, who is from Argentina, says that people try to jump the queue
Oh, uh-huh.
or cut in line, as the North
Mm-hmm.
Americans say. That surprises me. I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
that, but yeah,
Well,
maybe I was lucky.
I think all over the world there will be people who try to jump the queue. That's why we have a word for it, because there's always somebody who wants to do it. The majority of people follow the rules, but then there are always some people who don't follow the rules and they have
Yeah.
bad manners.
So
Mm.
that's queuing outside a restaurant. Let's go inside a restaurant now and talk about table manners when you're sitting at a table eating in a restaurant, for example, because I think our manners change when we're in public.
Mm-hmm.
Mine certainly do. So what's what's acceptable in restaurants in the UK?
Mm-hmm.
My dad was always very keen on correct table manners. For example, I had to ask permission to leave the table when
Me
I was a
too. I had
child.
to when I was trying, always. I could never leave the table without asking permission. Please, may I leave the table? That's what I
Yeah,
had to
can I
say.
leave
Did
the
you say that?
table? Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to use my knife and fork properly, hold my knife and fork
Mm-hmm.
properly, push the food onto my fork. I was taught table manners by
Mm-hmm.
my parents at a young age. Never at school, but at home, yeah.
Mhm.
I
No,
was
me
taught
too.
table
You
manners.
you because the tradition was with the way you hold the fork. Like Americans, for example, are quite happy eating with one hand with a fork, and that was considered very bad manners in Britain. So during the meal, you have to have both hands holding the implements, the knife and the
The knife
fork.
and the fork. Yeah.
And then with the fork, I remember a manner that we learned, which is the one you've mentioned, that you can't use your fork like a shovel. So
With the
your fork,
peas.
you can't, a fork has a sort of, I should have brought a fork in, shouldn't I? But a fork has a handle, and then there are the prongs like that. You can't use your fork like that, like a spoon. You
No.
had to invert your fork so that the prongs pointed down. And if you had something like peas, which were very difficult to prod, then you had to squash the peas against the fork and then put your fork in the mouth with the prongs down.
It
You were
took
not supposed to
ages to
put
eat
the prongs up
peas.
in your
It took
mouth.
so long to eat peas. It's like going
It did.
to eat Chinese food and only having one chopstick.
Chopstick.
Takes
Yes.
forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one
But
thing,
it's
Mhm.
strange. Do you still use your fork like that?
I can't remember the last time I had peas, but yes, I do.
I know, I
Um,
do. I think it's
I
because
do.
it's been ingrained in you from being a child. And it's something that you don't, because I know that, for example, in Spain, that's not the case. Because Spanish people have said to me, "What are you doing
Do you
with
eat
the
do you eat paella like
with
that?
the peas?" No, I don't. I eat paella the
You shove
Spanish
with a
way, like a
shovel, like a
spoon.
shovel.
Exactly, like a shovel. But maybe because I'm in Spain and that's sort of acceptable. But if I have peas on my plate, I find myself trying to squash them against the prongs.
Let's practice some of these expressions and words because I can't stand it when I see
Mhm,
young children running around a restaurant um, and disturbing other people who are eating. I don't know if you
mm,
feel the same. I think if children want to play, they should go outside. Now, that's maybe quite selfish of me. I don't have children. I know it's difficult sometimes to control children and to
mhm,
get them to sit at the table for a long time when they're very young. But it does get on my nerves when children are playing and shouting and running around
mhm.
when people are sitting down eating in a restaurant, in a
No,
public
that I
place
mean,
in a
I
restaurant.
do have children, and that also bothers me, Craig. I don't think that that's polite. It's not fair to the other people. The thing that really gets on my nerves in restaurants, and it does happen a lot in Spain sometimes, is when people at other tables are being really loud.
Hmm.
Hmm.
But that's
There's
very
something to
cultural, isn't
do.
it?
It's cultural, it is. But I find that, for example, if you're in a restaurant and there is a table with people who are behaving like out of the norm, everybody else is sitting normally, and there's one table that is behaving particularly loudly, I find that bad manners. Uh-huh.
Yeah, British people tend to be quieter in those social situations until they've had some alcohol.
Oh,
And when there's been a few beers drunk and a few glasses of wine drunk, British people get very, very loud.
yes, they do. Hmm. Yeah,
So it's,
I think that's
yeah,
true.
but I know, yeah, I agree with you
Hmm.
about that as well. Caroline's okay because she doesn't eat peas, so no problem. No peas, no problem. There's
What do you do with sweet corn, though, Caroline?
sweet corn, yeah.
Sweet
Chickpeas,
corn. Sweet corn is difficult because sweet corn doesn't squash.
no,
It's very tricky, sweet corn. Hmm.
yeah. Okay, let's look at another area.
Hmm.
Oh, this is a good one, isn't it? Mobile phones.
Mm.
There's lots we can talk about here. I don't like it when people use their mobile phone in a restaurant, for example, at the table,
Hmm.
unless it's an urgent call. If you're
But
expecting an
do
urgent
you
call,
mean using a phone to speak on the phone, or do you mean to text?
both.
Both.
If someone phones me, I will I'll get up and go outside to have the conversation. I won't have the
Hmm.
conversation at the table. It's
Hmm.
different if you're talking about something in a group of people and someone says, "What was the name of that actor who was in Saturday Night Fever?" And someone takes out their phone and looks up on Google. That's
Hmm.
a community thing. But if
Hmm.
someone's just sitting there looking at their Twitter or Facebook or Instagram
Hmm.
posts, that's rude, I think.
Hmm. No, I agree. I also don't like people who take a phone call when I'm in the middle of a conversation with them and they don't
Yeah.
say anything. So their phone rings and I'm talking to them and they immediately take their phone. I think it's important to say, first of all, well, usually it's important to reject the call, I think. So to say, I think it's better manners to say, excuse me, I'll just reject, and you reject because you've caused a disturbance. But if you have to take the call, I think you need to apologize and you have to say, I'm sorry, but I need to take this call. Would you mind? But
Yeah.
then I think you should go away and come back and apologize. And a lot of people take very banal calls that are not important. I mean, not all of us are heart surgeons on call. Yeah. And a lot of the calls are just totally banal, BANAL, which is very stupid, not very interesting,
Insignificant. Yeah.
insignificant,
Unimportant.
unimportant. Hmm.
It bothers me a lot when I'm in an office. If, for example, if I go to the bank or I go to um, renew my driving license or some bureaucratic office And what somebody is telling me without telling me when they answer their phone is that the person who they don't know, who has just
Mhm.
called them, is more important than I am. And I'm
Exactly.
sitting in front of them. So it's very
Mhm.
bad manners.
Mhm.
And yes, with phones, connected to Maria Clara's comment, who hates it when people play loud music or make loud sounds. People
Mhm.
on buses who talk really loudly on their phone,
Mhm.
that annoys me. And even if they've got these earphones in, you can still
Mhm.
hear the music. That can be really
Mhm.
annoying as well. And
To be
also
frank, I hate it when people make personal phone calls on a
on
bus or a
public
metro
transport.
because
Yeah,
I don't want to hear their personal conversation. And I find it very rude
yeah.
that because you cannot not listen, can you? You're forced to listen. Hmm.
Going back to the last topic, Hemma says that her parents were complimented as
Hmm.
well. You can say they were complimented in a restaurant for how well behaved my siblings and I
And
I was at the table. Yeah,
table. Yeah.
well done.
And I think that's very nice as well. Um, when I had my kids, when they were small, that also happened to me that a couple of times strangers, congratulated me or complimented me, and they said how well behaved my children were. And do you know that is a very small thing that you can do, but it does help parents a lot
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, I'm a people pleaser. So when people say that to me, I try even harder that my children are even better behaved.
Yeah.
But it's a very positive thing. And I have noticed that. And I want to try and do that too. When I see kids that are behaving really well, it's it's a very nice thing to do, to compliment the parents on how well they have done with bringing up their kids. Because if you've got kids, him has got children, it's really hard to bring your kids up because you're constantly saying to them, do this, do this, do. It requires an awful lot of persistence
Yeah.
to bring up kids with good manners. And so it is kind of nice if people can occasionally compliment the parents on doing it well.
I always make a point of doing that, not having kids myself. Young
Mm-hmm.
children very often annoy me, but when they don't, and when they're
Uh-huh.
well behaved, I make a point of paying a compliment
To
to the children and also
to
to
the
the parents.
children,
That
and to the
expression is
parents. Yeah,
also in the chat, to pay a
a
compliment.
compliment. Yeah. Hmm.
I think Karen is talking about sweet corn. It's not her cup of tea.
Can't eat tea with a fork, Caroline. uh-huh.
Ja-
Oh
Jacoba
my.
Jacobo says it can be annoying when people eat at the cinema. Yes, and make a lot of noise. I
Uh-huh.
hate
Yeah.
that. That's really annoying. They're
Uh-huh.
eating popcorn behind you or
Hmm.
next to you and talking
And
or looking
talking.
at their phone. They're looking at their phone
Hmm.
during the film. Why? Why did you go to the
Hmm.
cinema if you're looking at your phone? I don't understand
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
And Natalia hates it when people chew loudly.
Yeah, that can be
Yes,
annoying. And also
with their mouth
eating with
open.
mouth open. That was something we were taught as kids. You must not eat with your mouth full. Do not eat when your mouth is full. So if you have anything in your mouth, you
Do not
shouldn't.
talk, you mean,
Do
not
not
eat.
talk. Sorry, not do not eat. No, no, sorry. Do not talk with your mouth full. Don't talk with your mouth full. It's awful, isn't it, when people have a mouthful of food and then you see it all when they're talking
Yeah,
to you.
yeah, it's
That's
horrible.
very rude. I think that's pretty rude in all cultures, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Speaking with your mouth full. Some of
Al
these things are quite practical, aren't they? I think they're things that
Although
people.
there are some cultures in which burping is a compliment and it's not
Hmm.
rude.
Yes,
To
I've heard that too.
burp is where the wind comes up out of your mouth, and burping is sometimes, well, very often in Western countries, thought of as rude. But I
Hmm.
think in some
I
countries
think you've
it's a
said burb, but it's burp with a
oh,
P,
burp,
isn't it?
sorry.
Hmm.
Yeah, that should be
To
burp,
burp with a P,
the
B-U-R-P.
P, to burp.
Hmm.
That's not good manners
Hmm.
in the West.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to what should we look at next, Lynn? Any
Um,
personal choice?
let's talk about offices. Offices. You've got something there for office etiquette, and has it changed?
Oh, I have to
Because
remember when I worked in an office was a
well,
long
there,
time
yeah,
ago.
well, and I'm a remote worker now, so I don't work in an office. So there are I think office etiquette and things in business situations are changing. Uh-huh. And one of the interesting things was actually when remote working and video calling and online working came into being, because there was a lot of comments in social media about, for example, Zoom etiquette, they called it, didn't they?
What is Zoom etiquette?
Well, Zoom, obviously the
Mm-hmm.
online conferencing, and they were talking about how you should be dressed,
Mm-hmm.
whether you should have background noises, whether people should see your dog going back and forth when you're in an online meeting. So there was
Yeah,
a whole area after the pandemic of manners that didn't exist,
true.
but we have started to invent them. Uh-huh. With remote working and Zoom calls. And for example, it doesn't happen to me. I work all the time online, but usually, for example, I have noticed that my students are extremely punctual in an online environment.
Yes, I've
Whereas
noticed
when I
that.
used to work in the British Council and I used to have classes, many of my students would come in, like some of the students were early, but there would be sometimes half an hour would go by and people were still joining the class, which really annoyed me.
Yeah.
And I started with my classes in the British Council to say on the very first day, I have 3 rules. There are 3 things which really annoy me. And one is not being punctual. Uh-huh. And if you have a problem regularly because maybe your metro arrives consistently 5 minutes late, just tell me. And then I won't get angry. But it does make me angry. And I find it rude when people come into the class half an hour late.
And
Uh-huh.
just to maybe explain why, from a teacher's perspective, we plan the lesson so that we know more or less what we're going to teach in an hour or 90 minutes. So if people are coming into the classroom 15
Mm-hmm.
minutes late, we can't, we've maybe started or we haven't started or we don't know how long to wait. So you might allow 5 minutes and just
Mm-hmm.
chat and talk to the students. But if they're coming in at different times, it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to teach what you need to
Mm-hmm.
teach. But
No,
I
and
agree with you.
my problem with it was not for me. It was for the other students who arrived on
On
time.
time,
They were
yeah.
constantly losing minutes of their class because I was having to explain again to somebody what the task was. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that it was I felt very bad for the people who were on time. So I found that really rude. But that doesn't happen, for example, in an online class. I
And
have
I've
not
noticed
experienced that at all in my online classes. People are always on time.
I've noticed that as well because I teach online conversation to small groups. The maximum is 8 people, but sometimes we might have 6 or 7 people, maybe
Mm-hmm.
8 in the group. And usually, almost always, the students are arriving exactly on time on the
Fine. Yeah.
hour and
Yeah.
connecting on Zoom. And I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in joining one of these groups, I'll give you details at the end of this. But I think I've been really, really impressed at people's punctuality from all
Mhm.
different cultures because I
Yes.
don't
Yeah.
only teach
Yeah.
Spanish speakers. We
Yeah.
have
No, no,
people
no.
from the Czech Republic, from France, from
Mm-hmm.
Germany, from other countries, and they're all arriving right
Mm-hmm.
on time, which is wonderful from a teaching perspective. It's
Mm-hmm.
very good. Yeah.
One thing I remember when we did work in an office, Craig, you and I, well, in the place where we used to work, there was an office. There was also some things there that I found really bad. For example, I hated it to see people. We had communal keyboards because we had some shared computer spaces. And I hated it when I saw my colleagues eating
Yes.
over the keyboard. It
Yes.
really bothered me.
Me too. So you go to type and there'd be crumbs and bits of sandwich and things on the
Mhm.
keyboard, and it was disgusting. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
horrible. I never eat at my computer at home. I don't let my wife eat when she's using this computer
Uh-huh.
here because it's a work area. It should be clean. It should be
Uh-huh.
not full of olive oil and grease and
Uh-huh.
peas all over the place.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't eat like a big thing, but sometimes occasionally I have snacks, but this is my workspace. I don't share this with anybody.
You're
Uh-huh.
lucky.
So occasionally I have a cup of tea, which I've had here, or I might have, I don't know, something to a bit of fruit or something like that. But the thing is, it's my keyboard. The thing that really grosses me out, we say, to gross you out, which means to I'm keeping you busy, aren't I, Craig, with all this vocabulary today? But the thing
Grosses
that
me out.
grosses me out or freaks me out is to think that people have been licking their fingers and touching food and then smearing it over the keyboard, and then I have to touch it afterwards.
Or doing something worse if they're on
Or
their
do
own.
something.
Anyway, we won't dwell on that. Caroline says punctuality is kind of respect. Yes, it's respecting people's time. And
Mm,
time, as I think we all agree, is our most valuable resource.
mhm,
And if you have to wait for people, then you're losing your time. And it is a lack of respect. 100% in
mhm,
agreement, Caroline.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, One thing I wanted to say before we leave office etiquette, I can remember when I did work in the office many years ago in insurance. I worked in insurance and for the civil service, was
Mhm,
that there was a lot more sexist innuendo and conversation in the office than I think would be allowed now. The
mhm,
social
mhm,
norms, the social, what's acceptable to say in between co-workers when I was working in an office in the 80s and 90s, it was a lot freer. So I think things have improved a lot. You
mm,
can't say things that we said to one another back in those days, and
mhm,
things have moved on and things have improved.
mhm.
So
So the
that's
workplace has
a big
become more
change.
polite, actually, than it used to be in the
More
past.
politically correct,
More
more
politically
more
correct.
respectful of women,
Mhm,
which is
mhm,
obviously a good thing, and more equality and diversification,
mhm,
acceptance of
mhm,
people from different sexes and different ethnic
mm,
backgrounds as well.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's
No,
a good
I
thing.
agree. I think that that's true. I think that's very true. Mhm.
Do we have time for one more?
Go on
Yeah, I
then.
think so.
Uh-huh.
Got time for one more. What do
Has
you think?
nobody got any comments? I want to know what happens in Argentina in the offices. What kind of office problems do you hate in Argentina and or in the Ukraine, for example, as well? Because we've talked about, of course, we were in the office in Spain. I was talking about my experience. You in England, me in Germany. Which are a bit similar. I
And
also
also,
found, sorry, there's one more thing that I found interesting. When I give you this link to this BBC series, they made a distinction between the word etiquette and manners.
hmm,
And it's quite interesting. They said something like, if I've got it right, if I remember it right, they said something like that manners enable us to cooperate together in a civilized way. So we have manners, for example, about punctuality because it respects the other people's time. And we have manners, for example, about diffusing the situation. If you have some kind of bumping together in the street, there is a way to resolve a potential conflict.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
that manners are very much a useful set of rules that cultures or communities agree on to try to keep us all harmoniously working together. But apparently, the difference between manners and etiquette is that etiquette is a set of rules that have been created to try to distinguish some people from others. So, for example, table manners, like the rules we were talking about with the fork, right? That actually doesn't make any difference to
mm-hmm.
anybody. But there were etiquette guides, and it was usually from groups of people who wanted to, usually the aristocracy wanted to separate themselves from the proletariat,
class
the
system. Yeah.
class system. And so they introduced, apparently Louis XIV did a lot of this in France in the court, and they introduced a set of table manners, for example, which knife you should use, or how you should use your fork, where your hands go. In Germany, it's very common for your hands to be on the table. And in England, during a meal, and in England, it's the opposite. Your hands should be under the table, never on the table.
And never elbows.
And never, well, elbows has a reason, because elbows, you take people's space if you put your elbows. But I mean, where your hands are really doesn't matter, and how you use your fork doesn't matter. And on this program, they made the distinction between etiquette and manners, which I think is a nice distinction, because there are rules of etiquette that I just reject now,
Yeah, me too.
whereas there are other rules of manners which I find have something to do with respect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it there because we're nearly out of time. But this is a very interesting topic, and maybe we can
Mm-hmm.
revisit it and discuss other areas. We wanted to talk about making eye contact and looking at people and
Mm-hmm.
staring, public transport, driving, showing public affection. So maybe we can put a pin in it, as they say, put a pin in it and revisit this topic
Well,
later.
maybe you guys today who've heard this on the live stream, maybe you can just let us know if you think this is interesting for another class at some later date or not, if you want
Yep.
part 2.
Let us know
Maybe
if
I've
you-
been talking too much. I've been talking a lot. I beg your pardon. I've maybe been a bit rude today.
No, not at all. It's been really interesting
Mhm.
to hear your take, what you think, and also people in the chat. So if you'd like us to revisit and talk about this again, then let us know. We will be back again, but not until the 19th of April. So that's the next live stream we're going to do, taking a little break. 19th of April, which is a Wednesday. Let us know if you want us to revisit this. And also on the 16th of April, which is a Sunday, and the 18th of April, which is a Tuesday, that's when my next course starts for conversation. So if you'd like to join a small group of motivated students with me and improve your fluency, your pronunciation, your vocabulary, and improve your confidence and your fluency in speaking, send me an email and I will give you all the information. So I will put my email in the chat, and I think I have my email also somewhere here. Send me an email, say, Craig, I'm interested in your course, and I will give you information. Mention teachers@yahoo.s, and that's also going in the chat. Okay, Anthony.
Okay, I actually wanted to give a link to that program, the podcasts about manners as well, if any of you are interested in listening more. But unfortunately, I can't enter the chat. So maybe at the end of when we stop the stream, you can put it in the chat and people can see it.
Did you send me an email about that?
I did. I can send you a
or
quick
was it-
email now if you like with it. I've got the link here. Maybe
Yeah,
you can
send it to me.
Maybe you can just put that in, and while you're putting that in, I'll tell them about put it like this. Can I?
Yep, send me an
Yeah.
email. While you're sending
Okay.
it to me, Jacobo says he
Okay.
thinks it's important to be kind to people. Yes, and say thank you, please, excuse me. Many people are not considerate and prefer not to say these words. Yes, it's a changing society, isn't it? And the older I get, the more it seems to be changing.
But I think what Jacobo said is really important, because I think those words, thank you, please, excuse me, at the end of the day, they're just words.
Doesn't cost anything.
What they do is they show that you see that the other person is a human being. And I think, especially in the day and age of phones where everything is kind of virtual, people don't see each other as human beings. So I think those little words, it just sort of shows people, like the way the lady from Ukraine said that they shake hands, or
Kiss, yeah.
it recognizes that I'm a human being, you're a human being. That's very nice.
That link to the BBC podcast is in the chat. Have a
Thank you,
listen.
Craig.
It's very good, and that will improve your listening skills, and you'll learn something from that as well. So thank you very much for being with us. It's been a lot of fun. And don't forget, if you want a private teacher to help you with your English, putitlikethis.com. What can people
That's
find there,
me.
Lynn?
Well, I offer courses to help people prepare specifically to fulfill their objectives in English. So if you are preparing for an exam, that's one objective. If you're a business person and you need to make presentations, that could be another objective. You could be a language teacher and you want to improve your own pronunciation or your teaching skills in the classroom. So I offer a wide variety of courses, but if you look on putitlikethis.com, you'll be able to see some of the things that I do, and you can contact me over that web page.
Okay. Thanks again for watching. See you on the 19th. Until then,
Yeah.
take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Yes. See you soon, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.